Kirby lore just got more confusing. And no, I don't mean that in a good way. Before we sever the roots of this topic, we need to recap how we even got to this point to begin with. With Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe releasing in February of 2023, there's more information regarding Kirby's lore, storytelling, and overall narrative of the video game franchise. Kirby is co-owned by both Nintendo and HAL Laboratory. Both companies have shared rights to the IP. However, Kirby games are not developed by in-house Nintendo. Whether it be praise or critique, that would fall onto HAL Laboratory. This video is part 2 of my Deep Lore series, where the focus will be about the new remake that dropped over 6 months ago. Part 1 was about the storytelling process of the franchise, which you can check out here. Let's summarize the 2 main points of the first video that will be relevant here. First being that Kirby is not a story-driven video game franchise with deep lore. Second being how Laboratory's storytelling capabilities get overestimated by a group within the Nintendo space who I like to call the loud Kirby fans. I will be spoiling story events from the Kirby games, including the latest title, so if you're allergic to spoilers, flee while you still can. Now let's get into why Kirby lore just got more confusing. If you were to ask the average Kirby fan what game springboarded the franchise into deep lore territory, that would be Kirby's Return to Dreamland, a game that came out 19 years into the franchise's lifespan. However, said average fan would only give you that answer if they cared enough about the story to begin with. The loud Kirby fans and even YouTubers who cover Kirby lore are very insistent on Return to Dreamland because that's the game that opened the floodgates. So let's tackle the plot. The game starts off with a portal that opens in the skies of Popstar, and a ship crash lands on a dreamland. Kirby, Meta Knight, Dedede, and Bandana Waddle Dee enter the vessel to investigate. They find a pilot named Magolor who is a bit distraught since his ship, the Lore Starcutter, has lost 5 major components to it, along with 120 cogs known as energy spheres. Feeling bad for the guy, Kirby and company decide to help the traveler by collecting all the missing pieces throughout Dreamland. When the ship is restored, Magolor takes Kirby and Co. to his homeworld Helcandra, where they are immediately ambushed by a 4-headed dragon named Landia. With a new threat that Magolor wants removed from the picture, he asks Kirby and company to slay the dragon, and it drops an artifact known as the Master Crown. Here's where Magolor flips the script on his new friends and explains that this was his grand plan all along. With the power of the Master Crown, he will take over the universe, starting with planet Popstar. In order to stop him, Kirby and company team up with the now split Landia in order to chase and defeat Magolor once and for all. The director for Kirby's Return to Dreamland is Shinya Kumazaki, and has been a director for the franchise since 2008 with the remake of Kirby Superstar Ultra on the Nintendo DS. Superstar Ultra introduced a concept called the Special Page, where if you pause the game during certain boss fights, you'll get some flavor text about said boss. This trend would continue onwards for the franchise, and Return to Dreamland Deluxe is no exception. This type of storytelling is fundamentally flawed. Why, might you ask? Because the game will not tell you about them. The only way a newcomer will even know these special pages exist to begin with is if a veteran fan tells them about it, or if they find it by complete accident. Instead of weaving the special page content into the story mode organically via cutscenes, HAL Laboratory decided to start a game of hide-and-seek that nobody signed up to play. With over 11 years of other Kirby games to reference, I'm sure these special pages for a remake will have some deep lore to tap into, right? So let's go check in on our good old friend, Mr. Pause Screen Lore Guy. Care to comment?
Why does this dimension suddenly feel so dark and murky? Is it because you entered from Helcandra? There are a lot more Doomers here too. And some are even pairing up and working as a team. Ahoy! Fatty Putter, a glutton of the sea, has surfaced. As he inhales, he'll puff up to a massive size. Oh, and it looks like he's swallowed a ship part. Maybe that's how he got so strong. What does Wispy Woods want with the ship part it found? Maybe it's because it's so shiny? Whatever the reason, the Guardian of the Forest does not want to share it with Kirby.
Good question, Mr. Pause Screen Lore Guy. Why does a tree want a ship part? Wispy Woods is nearly in every game, yet HAL can't make any good reason for the tree's involvement in the story. A lot of these special pages are filled with nothing burgers. Watch out! Those apples will give you a tummy ache! Just in case you didn't know, Mr. Duder's angry. He's really mad. Those energy spheres you've seen all game long, They're the cause of the dimensional rifts. If there's one thing to retain from these pause screens is that the Master Crown can possess the individual who wears it, because it's never openly stated in the cutscenes. Canonicity is a problem in the Kirby series that is still haunting HAL Laboratory to this very day. A social network that is no longer with us. Miiverse. Players can make online posts and interact with Nintendo 3DS and Wii U game communities of their choosing. For some of the Kirby 3DS games, the developers would have their own special community where only they could post in it. Their messages would primarily be about game development and tips about gameplay. They would also occasionally drop story information onto Miiverse instead of, the actual video game. In 2016, HAL Laboratory hosted a Q&A on Miiverse where Kirby fans were encouraged to send questions related to Kirby Planet Robobot, which was the latest title at the time. Satoshi Ishida from HAL would read the questions, and Shinya Kumazaki from HAL would answer them. Let's look at two questions in particular, and the ripple effect it caused. Ishida asks if there's any connections plot-wise between the extra mode Meta Nightmare Returns and the main game's story mode. Kumazaki answers that Meta Nightmare Returns is a bonus mode, a what-if scenario, an alternate storyline. It's not possible for the story mode and Meta Nightmare Returns to coexist because Kirby already completed the story objective. Meta Nightmare Returns is the same campaign on a harder difficulty, but you play as Meta Knight instead and fight recolored bosses along with some new ones. Story mode would be retconned. Ishida asks if Meta Nightmare Returns and the True Arena are connected at all in relation to the story. Kumazaki says that the True Arena is like another what-if scenario, so you can't really consider everything to be connected. Arenas in Kirby games are boss rushes. Now that we're caught up with Miiverse lore, and I still can't believe this needs to be said, but the story events that happen in the story mode are canon. In the Kirby games, there's a mode called Subgame, which are essentially Mario Party minigames that you can play alone or with others. In Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, HAL Laboratory went further beyond and created Merry Magoland, a Magolor-themed amusement park, which is radical by the way. Here's what happens when you visit Magoland for the first time.
This is the tale of a different world in a different time. There, a traveler named Magolor built an amusement park where he could entertain his friends. It was a merry place where 4 friends could enjoy attractions and collect souvenirs together. It was a park full of excitement, where dreams could come to life. It was a place called Magoland.
It wouldn't make any sense for Magolor hosting a theme park while he's in the middle of betraying Kirby and company. After all, players can enter Merry Magoland whenever they want regardless of story progression. In fact, the game encourages you to switch between game modes. So why can we see Merry Magoland in the background in the first stage of Nutty Noon? Then what was the point of this message to begin with? In Kirby's Return to Dreamland for both the Nintendo Wii and Nintendo Switch, you can talk to Magolor in the Lore Star Cutter, in the main mode and extra mode. The extra mode for this game has the same levels, same collectibles, and same cutscenes. Although there's EX recolored bosses and 1 extra boss and egg engines, it's still Kirby and company doing the same story objective with the same end results. This information is noteworthy to the Kirby lore because of one conversation Kirby has with Magolor when the player has collected all 120 energy spheres in the EX mode.
Anyway, the truth is, I'm not really from Halcandra. I mean, have you seen this place? It's a dusty mess.
If this doesn't convince you to stop taking Kirby lore seriously, I don't know what will! Magolor's conversations was the main foundation of Kirby's deep lore. He vaguely talks about the ancients and how they created countless items and artifacts that could turn dreams into reality or legendary power on par for ruling the universe. If Magolor is a known liar, you will never know when he isn't lying. And this guy is supposed to be the main source of Kirby lore, because the main story itself is very surface level, just like the rest of the franchise.
Didn't think I'd need to say this, but LOL, how about we don't use this as a free ticket to shit on people's headcanons? LOL, I mean Jesus.
The loud Kirby fans are catching strays from others because their headcanons are no longer possible? Huh. That's really weird, guys. I wonder how those headcanons got out there in the world to begin with. This is the same fandom who believes the ancients are humans because a real-life woman performed at a Kirby music concert. It used to be up on YouTube, but now it's paywalled. Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe introduces a brand new story that takes place right after Magolor's defeat. Magolor Epilogue, the Interdimensional Traveler. Magolor loses his magic powers and is now trapped in another dimension. In order to get them back and ultimately escape, he must gather magic points from regular enemies and fruit fragments from more recolored bosses. Gathering all the fruit fragments at the Ethereal Altar, the remnants of the Master Crown that followed Magolor transforms into Crown Doomer, which eats the red fruit. After the defeat of Crown Doomer, the Master Crown transforms into its final form, a tree.
Let's say you come across an evil tree.
You again?
I wonder how people who talk shit about Kirby bosses, since one of them is literally just a tree, are going to react to this. If you know, you know.
The tree component is probably the craziest part of that thing.
No, it's not. It spends most of the boss fight in the background being, you know, a tree. At least Wispy Woods isn't here, but come on, HAL Labs, you couldn't come up with anything else.
But Meta, the Master Crown had to be a tree. It's vital for understanding Magolor's character and deep lore.
Hey Bucko, I'm not done yet, we'll get there! Once the Master Crown is dazed, Magolor picks up a sword from the rubble and creates his own version of the Ultra Sword. Taking a page from anime Dedede, Magolor cuts down the evil tree. In the aftermath of the battle, a brand new portal opens, and with his remaining strength, Magolor hops into the portal and disappears with the credits rolling. When Magolor's epilogue first released, I'll at least give credit to social media for making an effort not to spoil the epilogue, because that is new content. Because they could not be specific about what was happening at the end, they tend to overreact and embellish. There's an extra cutscene after the credits, so let's go take a look. Yeah, this cutscene isn't a big deal. Now that we're done with Magolor, let's move on.
But Meta, that's not true! The ending is absolutely insane! Super Kirby Clash is now canon, and besides, we now have Kirby lore connected to the Bible!
I'm sorry, what?
Shinya Kumazaki really dropped that color yellow in Magolor's design, supposed to symbolize betrayal just like in Christianity, and then dipped to never elaborate on this again.
Kirby kills gods over cake, versus, this character canonically symbolizes betrayal in a Christian sense, died, and then absolved himself of his sins to rise again.
The main collectibles Magolor is going after are called fruit fragments, which are just slices of green gem apples. Are these the Malus Pumila of Judgment? Is Magolor Eve, from the Bible? Who was tempted by evil and now is being tested by God? Please keep in mind Magolor is yellow because that's the color of betrayal in Christianity. Magolor's implicit Catholic guilt is a textual part of his character.
You ever think about that developer interview where they just casually dropped that Magolor has yellow on his design because it's associated with betrayal and Judas? Yeah, that one. And his other dimension outfit being white is because he's trying to repent. Kirby Lore goes hard.
I knew the Master Crown and Void Termina were connected. This redemption arc for Magolor is basically Judas traversing through the layers of Hell too. Destroy the fig tree that houses the forbidden fruit that Satan gave to Eve, the gem apples from. Kirby Clash.
How can Magolor be Judas, Eve, Jesus, and the serpent from the Bible all at the same time? There's just no way. Let's grab a bunch of strong ingredients, mix it all together in a pot, and hope that joint somehow hits because all these ingredients have so much weight to them. That's the problem with the loud Kirby fans. Making a mountain out of an anthill. They get off on shock value and knee-jerk reactions. It's their way to get people interested into Kirby, and especially the lore, which circles back to overreacting and embellishment. This is the same community who still freaks out about butterflies and eyeballs. When the Magolor biblical lore train went off the rails on social media, it was because of this image. An image that looks fresh off of 4chan, a Nintendo Direct leak. The focus on this image is about how yellow symbolizes the color of betrayal in Christianity. I had to ask around where this originated from because OP never mentioned where this came from explicitly, but the source is from the 2020 Kirby Art and Style collection. An art book. Lore in an art book. The writing that also mentions purple and white with the word justice specifying on the white part. Social media didn't make a big deal about those other two colors, just yellow, so that Kirby can piggyback off of Bible lore. Whatever makes heads turn. This Magolor art isn't even the final version. It's concept art. But hey, this isn't the first time you'll see lore Larrys grab art outside the games and use it to push their deep lore agenda. Unfortunately, my hand has been forced to talk about Super Kirby Clash. Super Kirby Clash was initially a sub-game in the 2016 game Kirby Planet Robobot, called Team Kirby Clash. 1 year later, HAL Laboratory decided to make a free-to-play eShop game on the Nintendo 3DS called Team Kirby Clash Deluxe, which further expands the sub-game. In 2019, the game managed to reach its final evolution form. HAL Laboratory took this game to the next level. A free-to-play eShop game on the Switch called Super Kirby Clash. Long, long ago, in a faraway realm, there was a beautiful, peaceful land called the Dream Kingdom. A villainous, masked sorcerer is causing havoc by spawning monsters across the land. In order to stop this terrible crisis, 4 heroes band together called Team Kirby. You might be wondering, why is Magolor relevant here? Because he shows up in Team Kirby Clash Deluxe and Super Kirby Clash, as a shopkeeper where you bring him goods in exchange for weapons, armors, and item enhancers to take out monsters quicker. At the end of Magolor's Epilogue, he's wearing the exact same attire. The loud Kirby fans care more about the destination of connecting the dots rather than the logic of connecting the dots to begin with. There's people who are led to believe that Super Kirby Clash is now canon because of Magolor Epilogue's ending. However, Super Kirby Clash isn't canon to begin with. Kumazaki got interviewed by Nintendo Dream in July 2017, and they asked him why Magolor's clothes were changed from blue to green for Team Kirby Clash Deluxe. We got a lot more than a simple answer. Magolor changed to fit in with the Dream Kingdom shopkeeper attire. Magolor is in another parallel universe. He has no reason to hide because he's not interacting with the same Kirby. Magolor got a transaction role which can be seen as negative, however he's a popular character. And lastly, Magolor is a liar, so white is a good look on him for innocence. Great character arc about atoning, huh guys?
But Meta, it must be canon! The Master Crown produces the gem apples in Super Kirby Clash! It has to be a tree boss!
In order to get anything done in Super Kirby Clash, you need gem apples. Oddly enough, in order to buy anything from Magolor, you need to give him your gem apples. When you beat any type of monster for the first time, they drop gem apples. Most of them aren't trees. In fact, we are greeted with even more EX recolored bosses, just like in modern Kirby game side modes. Bandana Waddle Dee and all of these characters cannot be here, unless you're making the argument that everyone came across an evil tree and got isekai'd into the Dream Kingdom together. And the beautiful cherry on top. Super Kirby Clash has Mr. Non-Canon himself, Galactonite. If you ever see this guy in your game, you might as well shoot your cannon out of a cannon. All of this evidence pointing towards non-canon, and yet you have Lore Liam saying that the events may not be canon, but it's still canon to Galactonite and to Magolor. That's what I like to call bad writing. Galactonite shows up just to be a punching bag, and all Magolor does is run a scam shop while gatekeeping you from any story progress unless you give him your wallet. Yeah, have fun dealing with the Vigor and dailies. Oh no, you're out of Vigor! Get Donowald. Staying up to date on Kirby lore is a nightmare. You might as well be playing Where's Waddle Doo, because information will be hiding in such random locations. Kumazaki and friends over at HAL Labs take part in interviews and panels quite a bit, so let's take a look at some of them. If you want to see them in full, the description is your friend. At the Games Developer Conference in March of 2023, Shinya Kumazaki had a panel called The Many Dimensions of Kirby. The presentation was not about Kirby's deep lore, but about game development for Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe and Kirby in the Forgotten Land. They even show off Magolor's early designs and concept art. They make zero mention of Magolor's colors in a 53-minute presentation. And funny enough, all that writing next to it is gone too. In May of 2023, there was a Nintendo Dream article, an 8-page interview from HAL Laboratory. Most of the content is about game development. Very little about story. Kumazaki does mention that there are loose connections with the rest of the series, and no unidirectional chronology. In March of 2022, Nintendo published an interview called Ask the Developer with HAL Laboratory talking about the challenges for developing a 3D Kirby game.
Do you think Kumazaki wishes American game journalists ask more questions about the lore he writes? Or is he perfectly happy answering stuff like, What does Kirby's tongue smell like every 6 months?
There's fans who are so lore-pilled about the franchise, they don't realize that when Hal gets the opportunity to speak about Kirby, their focus is on the gameplay. If this franchise had any form of deep lore, the desire for answers via interviews wouldn't be so sought out for. In March of 2023, Polygon had a chance to interview a Kirby director.
Dear reader, these are the questions I so often hear from you in our comments and on social media. Undeterred by the risk of humiliation, I took it upon myself to get some answers when given the rare opportunity to talk with the people who know Kirby best, the directors of his games.
Look at what you're making the interviewer do! Will or could Kirby ever fall in love? If you cut open Kirby, what would the inside look like? What happens if Kirby swallows another Kirby? What happens to the creatures Kirby swallows, and where do they go? The loud Kirby fans just added more lore. If you only play the video games, you have no way of knowing this if you're trying to keep up. Yet another interview you must hunt down that you're not even aware of. Remember that July 2017 Nintendo Dream interview we talked about earlier? It's next to impossible to find! The Kirby Wiki has it as a reference, but even they can't fully source it. In a franchise with already scarce lore, this causes problems. When you want to research, you'll naturally look up Wikipedia. But what happens if there's corruption from within?
Kirby lore is so deep? No, it's not. It's held together by a long string of headcanons and theories, and not even of the instant obvious variety, that the Kirby Wiki has to routinely take down because people keep writing shit down there as though it were fact.
In situations like these, the Wiki Walters would in fact be writing their own Kirby canon lore, which is spreading misinformation and misconceptions, which is very ironic. Hey guys, can we all agree that this headcanon I just made is canon? Alright, cool. Oh man, I must have missed the Kirby Lore Town Hall. I didn't agree to this. Where do I vote? Where do I sign up? Their main line of defense is to write you off completely because you're not a true fan according to them, and have only played Kirby Superstar or Super Smash Bros. Or Sakurai's games. When that prerequisite doesn't apply to you, they'll resort to anger over actual discussion. Here's an example where I talked about King Dedede in a not-so-fantastic light. Shut your mouth up! Or whatever the heck this is supposed to mean. Maybe it's a Kirby Mouthful Mode reference, I don't know. They can get mad all they want about Dedede, he's gonna be a boss fight in a future game anyway, so they're gonna have to deal with that when that time comes. Another line of defense these loud fans will do when they throw their wild headcanons into the wind is that people criticizing them are ruining the fun. Come on guys, let's have some fun. Okay then, let it be a two-way street, because when a Kirby outsider says something like, Susie is a robot, Dedede is a villain, or Kirby kills gods over cake, they treat it like it's the end of the world. It's so crazy how this is the Nintendo franchise they choose to take so seriously when it has laughable lore. You'll even have fans try to separate characters from lore itself, when lore, story, and characters are all elements that are intertwined. The characters need to lean much more in the lore in this case because the Kirby video game characters are super surface level. Now don't get me wrong, headcanons in a vacuum are fine. A story can't explain everything in the world. Just don't try to forcefully cram yours into others and then gatekeep others about it. And if Kirby has to rely so much on headcanons, then it's not deep lore. Hopefully I showed you all why Kirby lore just got more confusing. Hopefully there's no part 3 to this, but we'll see what happens when the next Kirby game drops, and hopefully nobody gets possessed, but that might be a coin flip because that's a plot device they like to use a lot. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and sayonara.